the last thing you're going to hear from me as your elections administrator is a very brief introduction to our presidential nominee. So Howie Hawkins is someone who I've known even before the Green Party, but certainly we have been working together in the Green Party for almost 20 years. I was Howie's running mate in 2010, the first time he ran for governor and got ballot status back for New York. We have done many events, many campaigns, many initiatives together. And so I am very pleased to announce the Green Party's 2020 presidential nominee, the original Green New Dealer, Howie Hawkins.
Hello, can you hear me? I assume you can hear me. First of all, I'm honored and humbled by the support given by the delegates, and I accept your nomination. And you just heard from Angela. You can see why I asked her to be my running mate. She's a great messenger for the Green Party. I've known her since 2014. We can work well together as a team. And what we are as a team is, I'm a retired Teamster. She's a truck driver. We got 2 workers for the White House. And we want to put a better class of people up in there than the grifters we got there right now. I want to second also the thanks that Angela gave to so many people in the Green Party, in our campaign, that brought us to this point. I just want to add one other person. That's the late Bruce Dixon, the former managing editor of Black Agenda Report. He was a friend of mine, and more than any other person, convinced me that I should take up and run this campaign. So we're drawing on his long experience and wisdom. In my campaign, we often say, what would Bruce say? What would Bruce do? And try to think how he deal with problems we face. And now I want to nominate you, the delegates of the Green Party, the members of the Green Party, the people out there thinking about supporting the Green Party, to be active participants in this campaign, because this won't work unless it's a mass movement. And that means everybody's got to play a part. Because as we've been saying, our country needs the Green Party now, because we're living in a failed state. It has failed us on these life or death issues, the COVID pandemic, the systemic racism. That means we are not yet a multiracial, a multicultural democracy. Growing economic inequality, that's a life or death issue for people on the bottom end of the income spectrum. The climate emergency and the new nuclear arms race. Like the Green parties in Europe and many other countries, our country needs the Green Party in the legislatures and the executive branch and the judiciaries at the local, the state, and the federal level to provide real solutions to these problems. Because these 2 parties of the corporate state are failing us. The pandemic has exposed that for everybody to see. They're presiding over a failed state. With 4% of the world's population, we got a quarter of the world's COVID deaths. We got 250,000 people going to die from this pandemic by the election at the rate we're going. The president, Donald Trump, has given up. COVID won, Trump is a loser. We knew that. We've seen it. Now he's running around like Typhoid Mary, holding super spreader rallies without masks and social distancing, making his own staff and supporters sick. That is sick. Fortunately, he's collapsing in the polls. He's toast. He's a loser and good riddance. But I keep asking, where the hell is Joe Biden? When you think of Joe Biden, what policy is he the champion of? He lives within commuter distance of the White House press corps. He could be down there pounding away to that press corps that we need a test, trace, and quarantine program to suppress community spread of this killer virus. He could pound away on a single message. Instead, where is he? And while he's at it, he could be going and calling for universal mail-in ballot option for the election this fall so everybody can vote. These are not controversial ideological issues. We have plenty of policy differences with Biden and the Democrats, but these are common sense solutions to serious problems. This is what our country needs. Biden talks about new leadership, but where the hell is he? The silence of Biden and the whole political leadership of both parties on demanding an emergency federal response to deal with this pandemic makes them all complicit in the hundreds of thousands of deaths that are unnecessary that we're experiencing. We can't open the economy and the schools until we suppress the virus. We can't do it safely. So we need that program. And where is this two-party corporate state? They're failing us. And that's why the Green Party needs to step up. And in recent weeks, we've been out on the streets protesting the pandemic we've had in this country for generations, for centuries, of racism. And we're calling for community control of the police because we cannot trust the police themselves. That's how they get away with murder and crime. We need police commissions that are selected by the people with the power to hire and fire the police chiefs, to get the racists and the sadists out for forces, to oversee the policies and the budgets, and to investigate and discipline officers for misconduct, independent of internal affairs inside the police departments. We need to reimagine public safety. The homeless don't need a vagrancy charge from a cop. They need a home. A person with a mental health crisis doesn't need a clueless cop with a gun. They need mental health experts. And we have to end this war on drugs, which has led to mass incarceration. With 4% of the world's population, we got a quarter of the world's prisoners. It's the largest prison system in the history of the world. So we got to treat drug abuse as a health problem. We should legalize marijuana and decriminalize the hard drugs like Portugal did. Instead of going to prison for possessing hard drugs, you go, you get a ticket, you got to appear at a hearing with a doctor, a lawyer, and a social worker. And they figure out how to help you deal with your addiction or using the drugs to cope with an economic problem, whatever it is, they're there to help. So instead of just throwing people in prison and building the biggest prison industrial system in the world, which Joe Biden had a lot to do, he wrote the legislative architecture for that as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We should be treating drug addiction as a health problem, not a criminal problem. And going back to the police, the demand is defund the police. Yes, we need to move resources from police department into these kind of services I was just talking about. But there's not enough money in the police department's budgets. We got to defund the military. So we have the resources we need to invest in the jobs, the housing, the schools, the healthcare that are needed in Black and Indigenous and people of color communities that have been segregated, discriminated against, and exploited for generations, right up to the present day. We need reparations for African Americans. Black America lost half its wealth during the Obama administration. Reparations goes back to slavery, but the exploitation and theft of Black property continues. We need a reparations plan, and we support the bill for reparations in Congress that includes both individual reparations to close the racial wealth gap so African American households have more resources to lead a better life, but also collective reparations. Rebuild the Black land base in the South and Black economic, educational, and cultural institutions. And while we're talking about repairing damages, we need to honor the treaties with indigenous nations and with the Mexican Americans under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. There is land that has been stolen by our government and by private interests in violation of those treaties. That should be returned, and the social services the United States is obligated to provide under these treaties should be fully provided, which they have not. And then we got the broader issue that affects the whole working class of economic inequality. It's killing us. Working class life expectancies have been declining in recent years. The life expectancy gap between our richest and poorest counties is now 21 years. This is a moral shame on this country, which is so rich. So we're talking about enacting an economic bill of rights to end poverty and economic despair. These rights should include the right to a living wage job, an income above poverty, affordable housing, Medicare for all, lifelong tuition-free public education, and a secure retirement. We will enact the right to a living wage job through a WPA-style jobs program, with government providing jobs in public services and public works for anyone willing and able to work who can't find a living wage job in the private sector. And we'll create a floor of living wages in the private sector by raising the minimum wage rapidly to $20 an hour and indexing it to inflation and productivity, so workers get the full value they contribute to the economy. We will enact the right to a guaranteed income above poverty. We'll build it into the progressive federal income tax. If your income is below the poverty line, the government will send you checks to bring you up and out of poverty. That's what Dr. King was demanding during the Poor People's Campaign of 1968. He said, "I'm now convinced that the solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income." People make it sound like poverty is hard to decide. The problem for poor people, most of whom work hard, is that they don't have enough money. So we build it into the tax structure so nobody is below the poverty line. We will realize the right to affordable housing by building 25 million units of quality public housing in the next decade, so everyone has access to an affordable home. We'll realize the right to quality health care for all by enacting Medicare for All national health insurance to pay for all medically necessary services for all Americans in the first year. And then over the next decade, we're going to build that out into a community-controlled national health service. So the hospitals and clinics are publicly owned. The doctors and other healthcare workers are salaried public employees instead of maximizing fees for service and creating a cost control problem, and also a problem of not spending enough time with patients to provide the proper care. And it will be under democratic control through locally elected health boards that then federate at the state and national level for overall coordination and planning. We will provide tuition-free public education lifelong, from childcare and pre-K through post-secondary college, trade schools, and continuing adult education. And we'll provide a secure retirement for all by doubling Social Security benefits, so no senior is living below the poverty line. Another life and death issue is the climate emergency. This is not just about more heat waves and stronger storms. We're talking about mass extinctions, ecosystem collapse, and the collapse of agriculture. The climate scientists now estimating if we go on a business as usual scenario, the capacity of agriculture to feed the human population we have right now will only be able to feed 10% of what we have now by the end of the century. Climate change is an existential crisis. And the Green Party's answer, our signature issue over the last decade, the Green New Deal. We've been campaigning for that since 2010, but the Democrats, of course, took the slogan, but what did they do? They diluted the content. The non-binding resolution for a Green New Deal introduced by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey dropped our ban on fracking and new fossil fuel infrastructure. And Joe Biden this week basically committed to fracking the hell out of the country. If we don't stop fracking and new fossil fuel infrastructure, we'll be locked into decades more fossil fuel burning, and the planet will be cooked. The non-binding resolution dropped deep cuts in military spending, which we want to help fund the Green New Deal. It dropped the phase out of dirty, dangerous, and uneconomical nuclear power, and it extended the deadline for zero emissions from 2030 to 2050. What happens when you give politicians a couple decades? They're gonna wait. And the climate science says we gotta do it in the next decade if we're gonna avoid the worst consequences. And so this non-binding resolution, Pelosi never let them vote on the House, and it went to the Senate, McConnell let them vote on it, and all the Democrats said it's a trick, and they voted present, except the four that voted with the Republicans no. Anybody that thinks they're gonna get a Green New Deal from the Democrats is deluded. And now the House Democrats just came out with a proposal. They're going to reduce carbon emissions. Their goal is 37% by 2030. That's not even what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change proposed in their last report of 45%. And those reports are conservative because they got to be approved by petro-states like Saudi Arabia and Russia and the United States. But the Democrats aren't even attempting to reach that conservative goal. You know, the situation is Trump may call climate change a hoax, but the Democrats act as if it's a hoax. And the Green Party is here to advance the full-strength Green New Deal. We want zero to negative greenhouse gas emissions and 100% clean energy by 2030. And we have an eco-socialist Green New Deal on our campaign website, howiehawkins.us, which you can study. And it provides for a 10-year, $27.5 trillion investment in public enterprise and planning, and particularly in the energy, transportation, and manufacturing sectors to get to zero emissions and 100% clean energy. Our plan will convert all the productive systems, not just power production, but transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and buildings to clean energy and zero emissions by 2030. So what we're proposing is a crash program like the United States did in the World War II emergency, when the federal government took over a quarter of the manufacturing capacity of the country in order to turn industry on a dime into what they called the arsenal of democracy, to arm the allies against the fascist Axis powers. We need to do nothing less to defeat climate change. Our eco-socialist Green New Deal creates 38 million new jobs. And now, in this COVID economic depression, we need the Green New Deal as much for economic recovery as for climate recovery. And then there's one more life or death issue that we've got to face that none of the major party candidates have even addressed, and that's the new nuclear arms race. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has moved its doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight. The US, Russia, and other nuclear powers are modernizing their forces. The strategic arms are becoming hypersonic, 6 times faster than they were. So instead of launch on warning, there's a counterforce. Now you launch on anticipation that the other side's about to launch. It's not even hair trigger. We're putting more tactical nukes into conventional forces with a crackpot idea. They call it, the military doctrine is escalate to de-escalate. You throw a nuke out there and then you de-escalate. It doesn't happen. Once the nukes start flying, as Daniel Ellsberg has documented in his book, The Doomsday Machine, they all fly and we're done. So we're going to take peace initiatives, a 75% cut in military spending, withdrawal from these endless wars, pledge no first use of nuclear weapons, and disarm to a minimum credible deterrent, and then go to the other 8 nuclear powers on the basis of those tension-reducing peace initiatives and say we want mutual and complete nuclear disarmament. And we go there with world public opinion, with the 122 nations that this week, 3 years ago, agreed to the text of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that 3 years ago. And hardly anybody in this country knows that, because the political leadership of both parties don't want to talk about it. It should be a top campaign issue, and we're going to make it one. So these are the issues we're going to fight on. And the next phase of our campaign is ballot access. And we're going for all 52 ballots, 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the advisory vote in Guam. And we want to thank the contributors that this week qualified us for federal primary matching funds, all contributions up to $250 per individual will be matched by Uncle Sam going forward, as well as those that are already contributed until about August 27th. So we'll soon have another $200,000 we can put into ballot access, and the more people contribute, the more we'll have. We're on the ballot or have signatures in hand in about 30 states. In July and August, it's going to be tough to get the rest of the states by petitioning. We've appealed for relief in many states from their governments. And some gave us relief, others we had to sue in court. And we've won some victories. We have other cases pending. But in some states, we've been forced, against the public health advice about social distancing, to go out wearing personal protective equipment, going out with hand sanitizer, and getting physical petition signatures. But we're not going to let governments that won't respect our right to be on the ballot keep us on the ballot. We're going to fight to get on every ballot. And ballot access in this country is harder than almost any other country in the world. You have to get a hell of a lot more signatures. A lot of countries don't run for president, but let's talk about national legislatures. In this country, you want to run as an independent for Congress, it takes thousands of signatures. 3,500 in New York, over 15,000 in Illinois, over 20,000 in Georgia. You want to do that in New Zealand, it takes 2 signatures. You want to run as an independent for the House of Commons in the UK, it takes 10 signatures. In Australia, it's 50. In Canada, it's 100. In Germany, it's 200. That's about as high as it goes until you get to the United States. Party suppression is part of voter suppression. And we're fighting Republican voter suppression in the form of photo IDs, voter roll purges, and not providing enough polling places, particularly in communities of color. But we're also fighting Democratic Party voter suppression in the form of party suppression. Here in New York, the New York Democrats, under the cover of the COVID pandemic, just passed a law that tripled the votes and signatures for independents to get on the ballot or get a ballot line, and doubled the frequency we have to do that. So the Democrats are suppressing the vote here. The New York Times, when they got wind of this plan, called it the Democrats. This is the headline: the Democrats' secret plan to kill third parties. One reason we're running for president is to secure ballot lines. In about 40 of the states, the vote we get determines whether the Green Party has a ballot line for the next election cycle. And in most states, it's 1, 2, or 3%. That's very achievable for us. And when we win those ballot lines, that will enable us to run much more readily local candidates, because we want to begin electing thousands as we go into the 2020s to local office and the local districts of state legislatures and Congress. That's how the Green Party is going to build up into a major party and force in American politics. You know, and difficult as it is, ballot access is largely under our control. We know what we got to do. But getting our story covered in the corporate media is not under our control. And our message to the corporate media is do your job as journalists. Cover the issues, not just the horse race. The Green Party is worth covering on these life or death issues. And I'm looking at you, NPR, and PBS, and MSNBC, and CNN, and the New York Times. You've been acting like state media stenographers for the two-party corporate state. Do your jobs. Cover the issues. Let the Green Party into the debate. Don't exclude us before the election happens. Let the voters make up their own minds. And then when it comes to debates, I'm ready to debate Biden and Trump, but I'm not sure they're ready to debate me. And are there any serious news organizations out there that will include me? Were there any news organizations that will include all the candidates that are on enough ballots to win the Electoral College? That would be in this election, the Greens and the Libertarians, as well as the Democrats and Republicans. That would be a four-way debate. That's what the American people deserve. They deserve to hear all their options. Or will the mainstream media continue to bow down to the Commission on Presidential Debates that is planning to limit the debates to Biden and Trump? Commission on Presidential Debates. Sounds like a government agency, sounds official, but in fact, it's a private corporation controlled by the two major parties to keep their competition out. So I hope some civic organizations and serious news organizations will take back the debates for the American people and not let the two parties exclude competition and rig the game. And then the question we always get asked by the media is, well, why are you spoiling the election for Joe Biden? And our answer is no. Joe Biden and the Democrats have spoiled this presidential election. The Green Party's been giving them the proven nonpartisan solution to the problem of spoiled elections since Ralph Nader ran in 2000. And that is abolish the Electoral College and have a ranked choice national popular vote for president. The last two Republicans were losers of the popular vote when they were first elected. It was the Electoral College that put them in office. You would think the Democrats would realize they have a problem and embrace our solution and get rid of the problem. Instead, they whine about the Greens and fight to keep us off the ballot and suppress the vote. You know, a lot of people say Jill Stein spoiled the election. No. Exit polls showed 61% of her supporters would have stayed home if she had not been on the ballot in 2016. So if you use that ratio in any of those close states like Michigan, Jill Stein was not the margin of difference. But the Democrats are looking for excuses instead of solutions to the problem of spoilers, which we have. Joe Biden is welcome to embrace it and try to convince people that he really believes it. So the last thing I want to say to people that are saying, well, you know, we got to get Trump out of there. Maybe I need to settle for Biden. If you were a Bernie Sanders supporter and you were for Medicare for all and a full-strength Green New Deal and student and medical debt relief and tuition-free public college, and you vote for Joe Biden, nobody knows you stand for that. Your vote won't count for that. You'll get lost in the sauce because you voted for Joe Biden, who opposes all those things. If you want to make your vote count, vote for the Green Party. Everybody knows what we stand for. Your vote will count. It'll be a message. It'll be a voice heard. And that's your leverage. The more votes we got, the more leverage we'll have after the election in advancing our program. And then our biggest bucket of votes is not people, refugees from the Sanders campaign. We welcome them, as many of them as want to come. But the biggest group are the 100 million people that did not vote in 2016. They're disproportionately working class, people of color, and young people. And they're not apathetic. They are totally alienated from the two parties that offer them no solutions, are never in their communities until election time comes, and then disappear after the election. And people say, I'm not going to get caught up in that game. Well, part of the game is they don't want you to vote, so they have to pay attention to you. We're giving you an opportunity to vote for something that really does address the economic issues you're facing, the health issues you're facing, the education problems you're facing. So we welcome as much support as we can get. As I said, this will only work if it's a grassroots mass movement. You want to get involved, go to the website, howiehawkins.us. Look, the corporate two-party state has failed us. Our party, our country needs the Green Party right now to advance real solutions to these life and death issues of our time. Our lives depend on it. We're running out of time on issues like the climate crisis, the COVID pandemic, and real solutions can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Howie and Angela. I just want to wrap things up and give a big thank you to every single person who made this day possible. It was a ton of work from a ton of people, everyone from the annual national meeting committee, the media committee, the presidential campaign support committee, the credentials committee, the platform committee, and I'm sure about 10 other committees that I'm not even thinking of at the moment. I also want to give a big shout out to all of the candidates and their campaign supporters. And then I also want to especially thank our ASL interpreters who have been with us all day and making sure that we had this being broadcast in American Sign Language. Thank you so much. And then especially our staff, and in particular, Lynn Serpy and Michael O'Neill, who are behind the scenes in our, in our war room in Brooklyn, New York, and making sure everything went as smoothly as possible today. So it is my pleasure to officially adjourn the meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to Kenneth for some final words.
Thank you, Hillary, and thank you everyone for your patience, for bearing with us throughout these past 4 or 5 hours here. Congratulations to Howie and Angela for sealing the deal in the 2020 Green Party presidential nomination. And so, like many of these things, there are also so many action items that we can do, right? We just can't show up here and then think our job is over. So, as Howie said, please visit howiehawkins.us to see how you could help support the campaign and help him with his presidential election for the Greens. Also, make sure you also sign up at gp.org as well. There are ways that you could sign up to volunteer. There are ways to sign up to donate. And there are just all sorts of things that you could do if you just visit the website. They give you a list of options and check boxes on ways you can volunteer to help the Green Party. Because, if you want to see the change in the structure and the organization, you got to get more involved. So please sign up at gp.org. Donate, sign up to volunteer, and also help your local candidates, any down ballot candidates that are running for office in the upcoming general election in 2020. Check them out. There's so many people running for local elections, school boards, state races, and Congress. So I just want to say thank you all so much, and let's get to work. Go Green Party.